when my mom smirked across the dinner table and announced, "We added your sister as a joint owner to your $145,000 investment portfolio." She expected me to burst into tears. She thought she'd finally backed me into a corner, forcing me to fund my golden child sister's lavish lifestyle. What my mother didn't know, what none of them knew, was that 48 hours earlier, I had quietly liquidated every single asset, paid the taxes, and moved the cash into an untouchable private vault. When my sister tried to swipe $50,000 for a down payment on a luxury sports car the very next morning, her card was declined. The total balance sitting in that joint account, exactly $8.50. They thought they were trapping me, but they had just walked right into a financial landmine of their own making. My name is Rachel. I'm 34 years old, and for the last decade I lived like a monk to build my financial freedom. While my peers were taking tropical vacations, buying designer clothes, and upgrading to new cars every 3 years, I was driving a 10-year-old hatchback and putting every spare dollar from my salary into a low-cost index fund, $145,000. That was the magic number I had painfully built up from scratch, a security net meant to buy my future home. Then there was my 28-year-old sister, Chloe. Chloe was the family princess, incapable of holding down a stable job for more than 6 months because every boss was too demanding and every office culture was toxic. My mother, Eleanor, enabled every bit of it. If Chloe wanted a trip to Bali to find herself, Mom paid for it. If Chloe maxed out a credit card, Mom found a way to bail her out. But as Mom's own retirement savings began to dry up, she started eyeing my hard-earned nest egg, not as my private savings, but as the family safety net. Over Sunday dinners, the subtle comments began. "Rachel, you have so much saved up and poor Chloe is struggling just to pay rent. Family is supposed to share." I always politely declined, but Mom wasn't used to taking no for an answer. The co-signing trap went back nearly 6 years to a time when I was young, naive, and still believed my mother had my best interests at heart. When I first opened the high-yield investment account, Eleanor convinced me to add her name as a joint secondary user. She framed it as a loving, protective measure, an emergency precaution in case I was ever in a terrible accident and couldn't manage my own affairs. I was 28, fresh off a major medical scare, and the thought of having a backup felt responsible. I never imagined she would hold onto that access like a loaded weapon, waiting for the right moment to strike. The realization hit me on a rainy Tuesday evening. I was reviewing my monthly account alerts when a notification popped up from the brokerage platform. A request to modify account permissions and add a third joint owner with full withdrawal privileges. Attached to the pending digital paperwork was my sister Chloe's full legal name and social security number. Eleanor hadn't just filled out the forms, she had initiated the transfer using her joint access, exploiting a loophole in the old account agreement that allowed either primary holder to add dependents. They were preparing to hand Chloe direct, unrestricted access to my $145,000 portfolio, without my knowledge, my consent, or a single signature from me. 2 days before the paperwork was scheduled to finalise, Eleanor called me for our usual weekly check-in. Her voice was unusually sweet, dripping with that condescending, smug warmth she always used right before pulling a power move. "Rachel, dear," she purred, "make sure you come to Sunday dinner this weekend. I have a wonderful surprise planned for the family. Big changes are coming, and we're finally going to balance the scales so everyone gets taken care of." She thought she was being subtle. In reality, she had just given me a 48-hour warning. The moment I hung up the phone with Eleanor, the panic vanished, replaced by an icy, crystal-clear focus. They thought they had backed me into a corner, but they had severely underestimated how fast I could move when my financial survival was on the line. I immediately opened my laptop, logged into the brokerage portal, and initiated a full portfolio liquidation. Every index fund, every fractional share, every single dividend reinvested asset I had spent 10 years accumulating, sold off in a matter of seconds. I knew the tax implications. I didn't care. I calculated the exact capital gains tax I would owe for the year, set aside roughly $22,000 in a high-yield reserve account purely for the IRS, and prepared to move the remaining $123,000 net payout. The next step required absolute precision. I didn't just transfer the funds to another account at the same institution where Eleanor might try to contest it. I opened a brand new solo high-yield savings account at a completely separate online bank, one where neither Eleanor nor Chloe had any history, connections, or footprint. Once the liquidation settled the following morning, I executed an electronic funds transfer for the entire balance. Well, almost the entire balance. I purposefully left exactly $8. $50 sitting in the original joint account. Closing the account entirely would have generated an automated email notification to Eleanor, blowing my cover before Sunday dinner. Leaving $8.50 kept the account technically open and active, while rendering it completely useless for anyone looking for a windfall. As I watched the transaction status update to completed, a wave of immense relief washed over me. For 6 years, Eleanor had held that joint access over my head like a shadow. In less than 24 hours, I had dismantled her leverage entirely. My money was safe, untouchable, and entirely under my control. All that was left was to put on my best poker face, walk into Sunday dinner, and watch their trap snap shut on empty space. Sunday dinner at Eleanor's house had always felt more like a court summons than a family meal, but that evening the air was practically vibrating with smug anticipation. Chloe was sitting at the head of the dining table, sipping wine and scrolling through her phone with a self-satisfied grin. Eleanor fluttered around the kitchen, barely able to contain her excitement. As soon as the main course was served, Eleanor tapped her glass with a spoon, demanding complete silence. "I have a major announcement to make." Eleanor beamed, looking directly at me with a look of triumphant authority. After a lot of thought and family discussion, we decided it's time to balance things out. "Rachel, as your mother, I officially added Chloe as a joint owner to your $145,000 investment account today. From now on, you two will share access equally so Chloe can finally start her event planning business and get herself a reliable car." Chloe flipped her hair, looking me dead in the eye. "It's about time," she boasted. "You've been hoarding all that money to yourself anyway, and Mom and I decided family comes first. I'm taking my fair share." They both stared at me, waiting for the screaming match, the tears, or the desperate pleading. Instead, I took a calm sip of my water, wiped my mouth with a napkin and smiled gently. "Is that so?" I replied smoothly. "Well, I certainly hope Chloe finds good use for whatever she manages to pull out of there." The 48 hours following that dinner were eerily quiet, but I knew the storm was brewing. On Tuesday morning, right around 10:30 a.m., my phone began to vibrate violently on my desk. It was Eleanor, calling 4 times in rapid succession. When I didn't answer, Chloe started spamming my messages with frantic, furious texts. What they didn't know was that Chloe had walked straight into a high-end dealership that morning, ready to drop a massive $50,000 down payment on a brand new luxury sports sedan. She had strutted up to the finance desk, handed the manager the debit card associated with the joint investment account, and sat back waiting to drive off the lot. The transaction was swiped once, declined, swiped a second time, declined again for insufficient funds. When Chloe logged into the banking app right there in front of the salesman, her smug expression completely collapsed. The total available balance displayed across the top of the screen wasn't $145,000. It was $8.50. When I finally picked up Eleanor's 5th call, her voice came screeching through the speaker so loudly I had to hold the phone away from my ear. "What did you do?" she screamed, her voice cracking with fury. "You stole Chloe's money. You stole from your own family. Where is the $145,000? I leaned back in my office chair, completely unfazed by her outburst. "I didn't steal anything, Mom," I replied with deadpan calm. "You can't steal money that you personally earned and deposited yourself. That $145,000 was my life savings, built from 10 years of my hard work. I simply moved my assets before you two could drain them. Though, if Chloe really needs that $8.50 left in the account, she's more than welcome to it." 3 days after the dealership humiliation, Eleanor and Chloe attempted one final desperate power play. They retained a cheap local estate attorney and sent a formal demand letter threatening to drag me to civil court for fraud, breach of fiduciary duty, and conversion of shared family assets. Eleanor was convinced that because her name was listed on the account agreement, she had a legal right to half the money, and that moving it without her permission was a crime. I didn't panic. I hired my own financial litigation attorney, who scheduled an official legal confrontation in a neutral conference room. When Eleanor, Chloe, and their lawyer sat down across the table, they looked smug, expecting me to crumble under the threat of a public trial. But before their attorney could even finish reading his opening remarks, my lawyer quietly opened a thick binder and slid a copy across the desk. Inside was 10 years of meticulous documentation. every paycheck direct deposit statement, every tax form showing my earned income, every bank transfer log proving that 100% of the funds in that account originated directly from my personal labour. There was not a single dollar, gift, or contribution from Eleanor or Chloe in the entire $145,000 history. My attorney leaned forward, his voice ice cold. Under state banking law, joint tenancy on a bank account does not grant ownership of the underlying funds to non-contributing signatories. Every penny belonged to Rachel. Furthermore, attempting to access and spend $50,000 of funds you never contributed could easily be viewed as attempted, unauthorised withdrawal. If you pursue this lawsuit, we will countersue for legal fees and request a formal police investigation into your attempt to modify account permissions without the primary earner's consent. Eleanor's face drained of all colour. Their attorney looked at the paper trail, looked at Eleanor, closed his notepad, and quietly told them they had no case. The fallout from that meeting was swift and brutal, but for the first time in my life, I wasn't the one paying the price for my family's dysfunction. Without my $145,000 safety net to bail them out, Chloe was forced to face her mounting debts on her own, taking an entry-level job and trading her dream car for public transportation. Eleanor tried sending guilt-tripping texts for a few weeks, claiming I had destroyed the family, but I held my ground and set firm, permanent boundaries. I eventually blocked their numbers and went low contact. With my nest egg completely secure in my private vault, I finally put that $145,000 toward its original purpose, placing a full cash down payment on a beautiful home of my own, entirely in my name. Walking through my front door on closing day brought a sense of peace I had never known. For years, I believed that standing up to my family meant losing them. In reality, it meant saving myself. If you were in my shoes, would you have left them that $8.50, or would you have cut them off even sooner? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and click the video on your screen for another wild story.